Hey, how's everybody doing tonight? Somebody give me a shout out in the comments if you can hear me. I apologize for being a couple of minutes late. I was talking to Michael Bancroft and, listening to Michael Bancroft over at John's Longbox, and John having a good conversation and throwing in my 2 cents every once in a while. I'm just going to skip over my regular scheduled viewing of Crom the Destroyer trailer at the first because I am late, and I do again apologize for that. And I want to talk tonight about myth in the modern story. But okay, Tony, thank you very much. Michael says you can hear me. Great. Thank you very much, Rex, as well. So if you're the first time here, if you haven't been to one of my Make Comics Fun Again streams, just to let you know, I usually go on for about 20 minutes or so about a topic, and then I go back and read the comments and see if anybody has any questions. So anybody have any questions for me about what I'm saying tonight, about what my books are about anything else on my channel, you go ahead and ask me. Just I ask to either tag me in the comment or put a question mark on it, and I'll see if I can get to all the questions before our hour is done. And oh yes, links are in the description for my graphic novels. But I want to talk about myth in the modern story today because, well, myth has a lot to do with the stories that I'm writing and a lot to do with the worlds that I'm creating within my comic books. And the thing is that, well, one of the very first videos I did on my channel was about Sana Amanad. She did a interview with Fast Company. It was a video that was probably about 2 years old at that time because I was just coming into YouTube. That was about 6 years ago. Whew, wow, 6 years ago. Anyway, I listened to it, and one of the things that really stuck in my craw was the fact that she said, and by the way, she is the person who ruined Marvel Comics for 10 years, being the second in command, the diversity officer, basically. What she said was they were using comics, and she talked about using them in a psychological way, because she talked about psychology, but as the new American mythology to teach people what she said were positive ideas. And by positive, she meant progressivism. And when I heard that was one of the things. There was plenty of things in that video that stuck in my craw. You want to go back and listen to that old video. It's really old on my channel. I apologize for the quality of it. I didn't even have a good mic back then. I barely have a good mic now. But anyway, yeah, that's not what myths are. That's not what myths are. And that is the exact opposite, as far as I'm concerned, of what myths are for and why they exist. Now, to go back and talk to you a little bit about the background about what I think about myths and how I think about myths. I'll go back to, it's my thesis for my master's. But I talked about, what I did basically was I read everything in Greek that was written before Plato, and what I tried to do was tie together the idea that the Greeks were very much into the idea of understanding truth, understanding that there is first of all, a truth to the universe, and B, they were trying to understand it in various ways. Now, I talked about this a couple of times on my channel, but the fact that, why did they do that? Well, one of the reasons why, especially the ideas that mostly come down to us, is because, and most people don't know this, I suppose you hung around my channel, you probably know this, but the Greek civilization, we think of it all as one ancient Greek civilization, but the Greeks of Troy were separated from the Greeks of Sparta and Athens and everything else by a long and torturous Dark Ages. And so they're not the same Greeks that were before the Dark Ages as they were after the Dark Ages. They tried to be, but they were very different in a very specific way. So the Trojans and the Spartans during the time of the Trojan War, because that's where we get Menelaus and the rest of them. So you have the same places with the same names. You still had Spartans after the Dark Ages, but they were a different kind of Spartans. Then there were a different kind of Greeks. And the whole point is, well, first of all, we don't know what caused this Dark Ages within Greece to split it in two in its history. But what we know is that they had very advanced civilization within, let's just say, the periods of the Trojans, and that advanced civilization was such that they had monuments and built buildings that were spectacularly organized and built and constructed, just and they left writing and everything else. But when the Dark Ages hit in Greece, it was so heavy on the people that they lost all the ability to read and write. And they certainly lost their ability to write down history or to read history or anything of that kind. And they looked at all these monuments around them because they had become nothing but subsistent farmers. That's all that the Greeks were during this Greek Dark Ages. Nobody was able to read, nobody was able to write, and so they couldn't understand how in the world their ancestors could build these spectacular monuments. And eventually, when they came out of this Dark Ages and they became something more than subsistent farmers, they had some free time. They learned again how to read, how to write, and they took the oral histories, because Homer was an oral story for a long time. It was written down in, I think it was 800 BC. But at the same time, it had been an oral story for a lot longer than that. And when they did this, I would say that this is the very crux of the modern, we'll put it that way, the modern, the Greeks that are closer to us, the Athenians and the rest. This was the crux of what it was that made them try to decipher what the truth was in so many ways. It was because, again, they were subsistent farmers looking at these giant monuments that these people had built, and they said, well, they must be demigods. Our ancestors must be, gods of some kind, or demigods, at the very least, something more than human. And the thing was that since these early Greeks were able to have such a high society that was based on rationality in some way, at the very least, within making, monuments and beautiful buildings, they had to try and decipher that just by looking at the thing without having any instruction manual of having to read and write. And trying to decipher within your own history that much complexity without the ability to read and write really shaped the minds of the Greek people to try to bring out patterns of what was real, what was true. And this is how, when I, again, did my thesis, this was the basis of my analyzing everything written in Greek, which is everything from the newer, after the Dark Ages forward until Plato. And I started off by saying, well, see, they believed that truth existed, that there was a truth to the universe, and that you could understand it. And they tried to understand this truth in various ways. And the first way that they would do this was through mythology, was through taking those old stories like Homer, which had been the Iliad and the Odyssey, which had been an oral story that had been told over and over and over again for hundreds of years, and it became a mythological story in a lot of ways, and a lot of the contextual language that they used, and what the who and what the kings were, who Agamemnon was, who Menelaus was, who Hector was, even Odysseus. They became mythological figures, and they became mythological figures again in this Greek mindset where they're trying to understand the truth of the universe and the truth of their own history, the truth of their country, the truth of their ancestors, and again, mixed up in that is the truth of the universe. That's what myth was really. And again, I've gone over this several times on my channel, that I think that there are several very unique kinds of mythology throughout European history. Having studied Greek history, Roman is just a rehashing of Greek history with some other things thrown in there. But if you look at Norse mythology and Celtic mythology, they have their own rich history, although Norse is very sparse on sources, unless you go back to, stones and engravings and things like that. But the point is that, again, my assertion that I've made many a times is that when those kinds of mythology came into contact with each other, the Greek mythology won out. Why? Because it was more rational, because it was more based on the real. And I think that's part of the reason why, some people know a lot about Norse mythology, but I don't think as many people know about Norse mythology as they know about ancient mythology of the Greeks and Romans, which again, Roman is just a rehashing of the Greek, because of this fact, because, Snorri, who we get most of the Viking mythology and the Norse mythology down from, he's extremely hard to read, and he doesn't tell stories in a very rational way. And it's the exact same with the Celts. I assert again, in my own study of mythology, that the Norse mythology is based upon a mindset and understanding of the cold, of snow and isolation, whereas the Celtic mythology is based upon a mindset of the twisted forest. And that's all well and good, and it makes a lot of sense in those places, in those times. But the Greek understanding was reason, and they did that because their minds are trained to reason, because of trying to seek out this truth of their ancestry. And so mythology, again, for Europe, it just became a dominant mythology, in the fact that more people were gravitating towards Greek mythology when just going back to myth, even during Christian times, when, they would read about or tell tales or have legends or things like that. A lot of them were rehashing of old Greek myths, or, a retelling, like the fact that Aesop's fables came down to them and they added their own fables to it during the Middle Ages, things like that. But the point again is that the really mythology that stayed, the mythology that stuck within people's minds, was based upon that rational principle. And it was a rational principle that was trying to understand the history of the people and the place, and to understand it in a rational way. And again, it is my view of mythology, and I've studied this deeply, although you can take whatever out of that, because what does that mean in today's day and age where universities are useless? But anyway, the point being that for me, mythology is a tried and tested telling of a story that has been passed down for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. And it, especially the ones that we have that are more Greek and Roman in their origin, the rough edges of the irrational get sanded down over the years by the retelling of this story, until you have something which has a connection to a mindset of understanding the truth, a mindset of explaining something that happened in the past in a true way, with a truism at the very least. Not to say that there aren't fantastical elements in there, but those fantastical elements are in service of the story, in service of understanding the past, in service of understanding the past in a way that makes actual sense. And, it might not be the most scientific way to do it. And this was, again, part of my whole thesis when I went on about it in my master's, is that they started with mythology, then they moved into poetry, then they went from there to history, and then went from there to philosophy, and it became more and more refined. But at the same time, the mythology was always there. So to me, mythology is something that explains the past in a very unique way, in a very searching for the truth way. And to try and turn it into a slur where Marvel Comics is saying we have to use mythology in order to psychologically indoctrinate people into the politics of the future, just really drove me insane. And that's one of the reasons why. There's a multitude of reasons why, but one of the reasons why, these people just don't understand, the people who are making comics today in mainstream comic companies like Marvel or DC or any of the other, major indie companies. They don't understand how to write a story, and they certainly don't understand how to write a mythological story. And because we all know that, especially the DC characters, Flash is, if you go down through the ages, I've been talking way too much, not showing you anything in the background. I apologize. I had this Bernie this slideshow ready here to, but anyways, I'll go back to yeah. The Flash is Hermes, and you have different DC characters being different mythological characters. Superman is a Hercules like character, and you got, of course, Wonder Woman, who is steeped in Greek mythology. All these kinds of characters like that. These are mythologically, at the very least, inspired characters, and I would say so are a lot of other comic characters, not just DC characters. So to have that kind of a character that draws its energy from myth, and to try to take that myth and to shove it into an explanation of the future instead of an exploration of the past does a disservice not only to mythology but to storytelling itself. And these people just don't understand that concept because they think of the past as something wicked. They think of the past as something we need to grow out of, and we're going to we're going to progress into this future where we don't have to think about those things anymore. Instead of the Greek idea, and it's not just the Greek, because there was many other civilizations that had this idea as well, of a golden age at the beginning. And that golden age at the beginning is to look back with reverence to your ancestors and say, how in the world did they do this? How in the world were they able to survive? How in the world could they do something that I could not do? And it's with them, the use of mythology is an understanding and a reverence for the past that is rooted in the reality of the history and the culture and, just where you came from. So that's why I think that myth in modern stories is just brutalized to the point that it's beaten to a bloody pulp, and you do not recognize it anymore. It is something that, for the life of me, you can't put a mythological figure into the hands of people who have such disdain for the past that they will kill it at any chance they have. And really, that's what we have within a lot of modern storytellers right now. And certainly those kinds of storytellers that gravitate towards writing comics or, controlling the comic industry within mainstream. So that's my spiel. I could go on for hours and hours about mythology and break down each one of those things that I talked about, but I've been talking for about 18 minutes now, so I think I'll get into the chat here. I apologize once again for going on for 15 minutes and not giving you any slideshow in the background. Just giving you that Bernie Wrightson, I think it was Bernie Wrightson piece was from Frankenstein, which was amazing, by the way. So it's not too bad to look at for a little while. So I'm probably going to read some questions and go off for another tangent for 5 or 10 minutes on mythology, because I love to speak about mythology. So let's see who's here in the comments here. Mystic is here. How you doing? Sage is here. Rex is here. Stress level is here. So is Jesse. How you doing, Jesse? Oh, I haven't seen Jesse for a while. I don't think I've seen Jesse for a while. Anyways, it's good to see you here, Jesse. Michael is here. Let's see. Tony is here as well. Let's see. Scrolling down, see who else is here. I'll have to start reading some of these comments, not just flipping by them. Vaz is here. Sound Engraver is here. And with a $2 super chat, thank you very much, Sound Engraver. I always like to give a shout out for Sound Engraver. She has a great channel. She does, pop culture analysis, kind of like I do, but she has a very different focus on it. She does a lot of stuff talking about music and such like, things that I don't have a whole lot of coverage of. We'll just put it that way. Let's see. Scrolling down. Give me a second here. I have to see who else is here. Sage, I don't know if I saw you here before up top or not and said hello. Puffy is here. How you doing? That Puffy says, wow, I just read about the Dark Ages. Yeah, Greek Dark Ages is interesting thing to read about, to say the least. Let's see. Michael says there was an earthquake that caused a tsunami. Well, we don't really know what happened there. That was a beautiful picture of Red Sonja in the background. Michael also says, or everything was destroyed by the sea people. Yes, okay. Uh, I like your, we'll say, mythological uh, questions or theories about the idea of the Greek Dark Ages. Let's see. Vaz says here, on one thumbnail, you had the two Thomas Valiant and the Crom book side by side, and I just noticed the date you put under the price for Crom, 4901 BC to 2552 BC. Yes, indeed. Well, thank you very much, Vaz. You are one of the first to notice that. But yes, that is the time period within which Crom does take place. So we're going back fairly far, but not as far back as something like Conan went back, which would probably be 10,000 BC. So scrolling down. I do that, by the way. Some people are always asking me, why did you put the wrong date on the Valiant Heroes? Because it didn't come out that year. And when you get that for Thomas Valiant, and when you get the Valiant Heroes, it's going to say, I don't know what it is, but it's not the current year that it's going to have, because that's a timeline. It's not the date that the book comes out. That's the timeline of when the thing occurs, so that if you ever wish to read the Valiant universe books, you'll know which ones come before which, and you can read them chronologically, as it were. Let's see. Scrolling down. Sage says, Apollo and Poseidon built the walls of Troy. Well, that's according to the mythology. Yes, indeed. Let's see who else is here. John is here. How you doing, John? Let's see. Michael says we're talking about myths of Troy and the ancient Greeks. The Trojans were destroyed because Agamemnon was jealous of their wealth and he wanted to control trade in the Aegean Sea. Well, you have to remember that, let's see. According to mythological sources, we'll just go with mythological sources here. The people who are fighting the battles of Troy were basically the sons and grandsons of the people who went on the ship, which was Jason and the Argonauts. So the Argos. That was the first ship. The reason why it was supposed to be such a unique ship was because it was the first ship that was able to handle open seas. So that's why it was considered almost a mythological ship, because ships in that the Greeks had and could use up until that point weren't able to handle open seas. They could only be ships that were very used very close to the shore. So to have trade cut off from one section to another would not be a hard thing to do, since you would have, again, only one generation after the very first ship that could handle open water. You wouldn't have that many ships again that could handle open water. So they'd always have to go through a very close to the shoreline trade route, which again would be easy to cut off. Which was what Michael's I think what Michael is trying to get at there. But yeah, it's an interesting idea. Let's see. Buffy says, nah, the Dark Ages were caused by the aliens. Okay. All right. So let's see. Scrolling down. Rex says, the thing is that the pre-classical Greeks, the Mycenaean Greeks, Poseidon was the chief god, not Zeus, and Poseidon held sway over both the sea and the underworld. No mention of Hades or a similar god. All right. Well, good little diving into the Mycenaean mythology there as well. Thank you very much, Rex. Sage says, is that because people were afraid of Poseidon? That's because people were afraid of the sea. Again, we're talking about the Greeks, and Greece is very much a sea, not a sea power so much as a sea country, a country that is controlled by the sea, again, with all the islands as well. And again, to have to get from those islands and to go across those seas and waterways with ships that could not transverse could not travel through open seas, yeah, you would be afraid of the water as well. Let's see. I think I'll put that slideshow back up for most of what we're going to talk about here. Oh, crud, I've lost my place. Scrolling up. Let's see. Oh, here we are. I see Puffy talking about aliens, that we're in the right vicinity. Let's see. Rex also says about, I never know if I pronounce his name correctly, but about Snorri, a lot of people seem to think that he was influenced by Christianity due to similarities in how he wrote the myths down, and because no pre-Christian source for Norse mythology exists. Yes, that's again one of the things that you have to wonder about Snorri and where he got a lot of this, because we don't know. And the stuff that I have read about talks about him getting it from inscriptions and things like that, and from, again, oral history, and it coming down just through stories and through legends that people would tell each other around a fire. But we don't know that for sure. So it could be, very much could be, Rex. Let's see. Michael also says Greece is a very earthquake-prone area, so them being afraid of Poseidon makes sense. Yeah, makes sense indeed with that as well. Thrown into the mix, I agree. And Michael continues, since Poseidon is the god of the sea and earthquakes. So let's see. Sage says, so Zeus is elevated because of his re-enlightenment. I'm not entirely sure if that is the case, Sage, but it's an interesting idea. Let's see. John shouts out and says, Happy Holy Week. Happy Holy Week to all. I will echo that sentiment, and thank you very much, John, for that. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. Let's see if we have any other questions. Scrolling down. Oh, Michael says, Zeus was elevated because lightning is scarier and has no explanation for primitive man. Well, again, I go back to mythology. Lightning is one of the primary causes of discontent among the people. Let's just say that. It's something to be afraid of. Yeah. And it's, again, something to be afraid of on land. So, it's not like I'm going out into the sea and I'm going to take my life in my own hands. I'm going to stand in this one specific area and I might die. So if I remember correctly, because of the what is it? Land formations in Greece, you get a lot of lightning anyways, just because the clouds get caught on the getting pushed upward by the well, not so, depending on where you are in the world. In Greece, they'd be called mountains. I know that if you're in a place with really high mountains, they wouldn't probably be thought of as mountains, but yes, it would at the very least push the cloud cover up and cause storms, and which again would make it a lightning prone area. Let's see. Scrolling down. I was just thinking this, Zach Dan. What do you think Green Lantern is? When I was talking about the Flash, the idea that the Flash is Mercury, and well, Superman is based upon strong men, and those strong men were people who would imitate Hercules and things like that. So, but no, I don't know. For the life of me, I can't think of what Green Lantern is based on. Quite honestly. You'd have to go back to the earliest Green Lantern in order to do that. And I don't know that much about Green Lantern from its early comics, so I can't answer that question. I wish I could. I'll have to think about that and do a little reading, maybe some older comics. Alessandro is here. How you doing, Alessandro? He says, speaking of mythology, I noticed that progressives tend to be very Orientalist, often basing stories in Hindu or Buddhist mythology. For example, the Rogan Ghosh comic from Vertigo. I did not notice that myself, Alessandro, but I don't think that, just off the top of my head, spitballing here, but I don't think that it's a coincidence that they would take such kind of mythology and run with it. Why? Because Hindu and Buddhist mythology is sort of based upon an irrational principle in one sense, and a power-based principle in another. because, well, if you look at it, well, if you look at, let's say, Buddhist enlightenment through the eyes of a Westerner, it's that the idea that you can tap into the power of the universe and become one with that power. So, that would obviously be something attractive to progressives because they're all about power. And the Hindu ideas behind it is very much a God for every stream, God for every mountain, God for every place, God for every tree kind of idea. And it's the reason why Europeans come up with science, and let's say places with Hindu religions or even Oriental religions didn't. Why? Because they thought, if you think that there's a God in everything and that God can change any part of that thing into something else that they want to through mythical or the power of God into something else completely, then why study it? It could change. It could be that the God's trying to trick you. But the more Christian idea is that no, there's one God. He's separate from nature, and nature doesn't change. It has set rules. Therefore, you can write down those rules and then use those rules to find out other rules in a logical way. That's very much the Christian idea of where science came from. And since the Hindu idea, and not just the Hindu idea, is the opposite of that. The, like you say, Orientalist way of thinking is the opposite of that. Is that there's no reason to look for reason, because the gods might change it at a whim, and everything's based upon power. Then yeah, that's the idea of progressivism right there in a nutshell. So I can see why. That's just off the top of my head again, but I could see why there is a progressive. If there is a progressive leaning in that way, that would be my take on why. Robert is here. How you doing, Robert? Nice to see you in the chat. John says, is this Wrightson's art? Not all of it. Only a few pieces of it are. The others are just black and white stuff that I wanted to put up in the background, that I have a little bit of tie to mythology. And I'm talking about mythology and just want to put up some beautiful art in the background. But quite honestly, just think about Wrightson's Frankenstein. That's why I put it up there, is because it's based on Prometheus, right? The Greek myth of Prometheus. That's what the whole Frankenstein myth or story is supposed to be based upon, that myth. So that's part of the reason why I chose it. Scrolling down, see who else is here. Let's see. Robert says, I'm late trying to catch up at 1.5 speed. Well, hopefully you catch us soon, Robert. Sage also says, myths are also used to inform people of their enemies. Well, again, yeah, that's part of something that is real. I mean, if you're going to teach someone about your enemies, you darn well better actually base what you're talking about on the reality, right? If you want to be the ability to defend yourself against them, you have to know what they're actually about, not faux ideas of what they're about. And really, that's one of the Achilles heels of progressivism, if you ask me, because they paint their foes to the world as being almost some scary monster that has mythical powers, and they don't actually base their descriptions of their foe, which is us, upon reality. And neither do they dare to even come into our spaces to learn about what we have to say. And so their scary boogeyman doesn't make any sense to people, and they are very ill-equipped to deal with us, especially when we come at them with reason. So that's one of their Achilles heels, and one that I like to exploit. Let's see. Scrolling down, Rex says, RJ, I think part of the attitude of dismissing the past is the tendency for every generation to think they're smarter than the previous and wiser than the next. Honestly, Rex, that is called presentism. And presentism is something that you might be fooled into thinking is something that occurred throughout history. It is not. It is very much a modern attitude. And as someone who studied the ideas of the ancients and the medievals, yeah, they didn't think that way. They absolutely did not think that way. It doesn't matter if they were ancient Greeks or ancient Romans or medieval Christians. They were all of the opinion that, no, we reverence our past because it was better than what we have right now, because there was a golden age. Even if you want to go back to the Christian idea of there, Adam and Eve, and there was a Garden of Eden. So that idea, that presentism idea, that the every generation thinks that they're smarter than the last and wiser than the next. That's a very much a modern idea, I think, based upon we'll say Enlightenment principles more than anything else. Scrolling down, Zach Dan says, one of the many flaws of progressivism, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've come from. Yes, indeed, Zach Dan. I do remember at the first of my channel talking about that again and again. That was 6 years ago. So that's one of the things, they have no roadmap. That's exactly how I described it in a video probably 5 years ago. They have no roadmap to know how they got where they are, so they don't know how to get where they think they're going. Let's see. Sound Engraver says, modern storytellers struggle with chronocentrism, the disdain for the past. Well, they do have a disdain for the past. I never heard it used in that specific moniker, Sound Engraver, but yes, they struggle with a disdain for the past while trying to subvert it at the same time. I just did a video. I don't know if it was last week or 2 weeks ago, but again, talking, I think it was last week, talking about the Star Wars people that are dealing with the new Star Wars show. And I've heard this, again, having done several videos about Star Wars over the last 3 to 4 months. They all come up with this same idea. They all state it in their own way, but they say it over and over again. What they say is, we're going to pay homage to the past of the stories, but at the same time subvert it. And I'm sorry, but no, you're not. You're the only reason why you're paying lip service to the past is so you can subvert the entire thing. That's all they're trying to do. They're just trying to cover their tracks. So yeah, they, again, disdain, as you said, Sound Engraver, for the past in order to try to build their utopian future. Vaz says, most current day writers write about the stuff they know and they don't know much. Yep, darn right, Vaz. Because again, they've been taught to think in a non-rational way, in a way where they disdain and just common everyday don't think that reality is anything except what can be defined by their feelings. So yeah, they know very little to nothing, and that's what they write. You're absolutely right. Scrolling down, Sage says, Roman creation myth is about survivors of Troy rebuilding. Well, yes, it was Aeneas. That's part of what the Aeneid is about. It is Aeneas coming from Troy after he escaped the slaughter of Troy, and he goes and meets the people that are the natives of Italy at that time, and then starts the civilization in a different direction. We'll just put it that way. But yeah, one of the things I forgot to mention was the fact that, yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm old enough to remember that before, like, I mean, well, we'll just put it this way. When I was a kid, people were still, and kids were still, reading things like the Aeneid and the Iliad and the Odyssey, because for hundreds of years, at the very least, prior to that, when we didn't have, comic books and we didn't have kids' stories, or very many of them, that's what kids read. You wanted a adventure story, they went, in the 1800s or 1700s, they went and read the Aeneid. They went and read the Odyssey or the Iliad. And really, I think kids should get back to reading those kinds of things, even though a lot of people might think of them as a bit too gory for children, but I don't. You want to start them off with something small, start them off with the Battle of Frogs and Mice, which is just a retelling of the battles of Troy from Homer, except with frogs and mice instead of Greeks and Troys, or sorry, the mainland Greeks and Trojans. But it's basically the same thing. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. Sage says, what? I'm not sure. I'm not following that part of the conversation. Frankenstein is a modern day Prometheus in the books. A modern day Prometheus is the book's full title. Yes, thank you very much, Michael. I forgot that it was the book's full title. And well, part of the reason being, I think, because Prometheus was set to suffer over and over again because the giant eagle would come and eat his liver every day, and then it would grow back, and then it would come back and eat the liver the next day, and so he was, suffering continually for his stealing of the fire from the gods and giving it to men. So let's see, scrolling down. That oh, why we have someone new here, Randall. How you doing, Randall Kildare? What a great handle. Hey man, never caught a live stream from you before. Well, great to have you here, Randall. Great to have new people here all the time. Let's see. Scrolling down, everybody's saying hello to Randall, which is great. Let's see if we have any other. Oh, I think Tony has questions here. What ancient civilization had the best mythology? Quite honestly, it's the Greeks. I'm sorry. For me, it's the Greeks. Why? Because it was so rational. It was a rational exploration of what they didn't understand, and it blossomed into more and more, as I said earlier, more and more rational explanations going into poetry and then history and then philosophy. So, that's my take on it anyways. Let's see, scrolling down. Da-da. So Martin is here. How you doing, Martin? Martin says, mythology is just physics 1.0, our understanding of nature without number theory, writing, or geometry. Well, very good. That's a really good way to put it. I was just thinking about this myself. I was going to talk to John about it. I didn't get the chance. But I love geometry, by the way. Euclidean geometry is one of the things I loved. I was never that good at math, but I was good enough at math so that when I was in high school, I think it was, what was it, like grade 11 or 12, we had 3 different math classes, or you could choose, right? So there was normal math, which was arithmetic, and then there was advanced math, which was calculus, and then there was Euclidean geometry. So I took all 3. But yeah, I loved Euclidean geometry, and really, I think that's what Plato, no, not Plato, Aristotle did with his description of what logic is. He took geometry and tried to take that mathematical pattern of Euclidean geometry, because Euclidean geometry is, well, you can do Euclidean geometry without any numbers. Like, we did an entire year's worth of studying Euclidean geometry, and it's all about theorems and definitions. We didn't use numbers ever in the class, but to try to take those theorems and definitions of understanding exactly what I'm talking about, what you're talking about here, Martin, trying to understand like the geometrical shapes of the buildings and the monuments that their ancestors had left, and how they could actually fit together and stand up and all that kind of thing. And that formed their understanding. And then he took that geometrical understanding way of looking at the world and then applied it to language itself, which led to what logic is. But yeah, the other thing being that the funny thing, as I said, I was going to talk to John about this. I was just thinking about this myself. I was watching an old show. It was like 1985 show, but there was a psychic in it, which was this woman. She was a psychic and she could see things, and you never knew if she was actually a psychic. Some of the things that she thought about in the show and thought of as part of her psychic ability actually did happen, but you don't know if it was actual psychic ability or not. So my thought was, I never thought of it this way before until I watched a show, but it was the fact that perhaps it is people who claim to have like psychic abilities, is the fact that they're looking at things through a logical perspective and able to deduce what is actually going to happen, except the fact that their brains don't, well, I'll say that their frontal cortex, what they've learned in their life lessons, isn't logic. They've learned more in an emotional way, but their brain is working with reality, and their instinctual brain is working in a logical way, and able to pick up these logical patterns, even though the more conscious part of their brain can't actually understand them because they're too trained up in emotions. So that's what they think of as a psychic ability. That was my idea when I was watching that show. But that would be very much the idea that you're talking about, Martin. Mythology being physics 101 or 1.0, 1.0. Let's see, scrolling down. Alessandro says it's true that progressives can't write stories about mythological characters. An example is the God is Dead comic from Avatar Press. I am not aware of that comic, but I again, that's one of the things I stated earlier, and I agree with. They can't write mythological characters at all. Buffy says, by the way, RJ, did you write your stories with the hope that they'd be mythological too, like stories worthy of being legends? I hope that makes sense. Well, let me just say, I base my stories on mythology. That's one of the things. Even though I think that the best mythology is Greek mythology, I am very much someone who loves Celtic mythology. One of the very few in today's day and age. But I love Celtic mythology. And one of the ideas that I love within Celtic mythology is the idea of other worlds. An other world is a part of our world that you can't get to except by going through what we would today call a portal. But in the old myths, it's not really a portal. It's just a path to that other world that if you don't follow it exactly, you can't get there. So the path might be going through a grove of trees that no one can really find because it's so deep in the woods, or going through a tunnel, or going across a bridge that no one else has the courage to go across, or sometimes going under the water. Things like this. This is where you would find an entrance to another world. And that's that idea is over and over again used within Celtic mythology. And I said to myself, these older comics, older DC and Marvel comics, they have this idea and they use that idea over and over again, but not to the extent of being able to use it as Celtic mythology did. Because look at something like the Savage Lands within Marvel, or even the old Inhuman settlement, or if you go back to older DC comics before Crisis, you always had, oh look, there was an ancient city underneath Metropolis this entire time. It was just dead and nobody lives there anymore, or this kind of thing. These things were always happening, even in the Red Circle comics, the original like Black Hood and things like that. They would constantly run into these civilizations that had been forgotten. They just fell down a hole in a cave, and all of a sudden they started exploring this ancient civilization. These are the ideas of many older comics, and today it's seen as a bit campy. And the things like the Savage Lands, they try to put a geological specific area. It's in, where is it, the Antarctica for some reason, because it's hard to get there, and then they move the Inhumans to the moon and all this kind of thing. But anyway, they've gotten away from that kind of storytelling, and I think that kind of storytelling is one of the things that made really interesting stories within older comics. So within my stories, I try to incorporate the idea of other worlds. We'll put that in quotation marks because they're not really other worlds. They're not other dimensions or anything like that. They're just worlds that you can't get to normally without going through a quote unquote portal. But they're part of our world. And that, again, that's a shout out back to the old Celtic mythology. And again, if you watch my trailer for Crom the Destroyer, which I didn't play today, but I'll probably play it at the end. It's talking about the character, which starts off as king, and he goes away and comes back, but comes from the Land of Promise. The Land of Promise is a place in Celtic mythology. And so, I'm trying to tie this into Celtic mythology a bit as well. And again, Crom the Destroyer is the ancient history for the Valiant universe. So, Crom the Destroyer lives in the same universe as Thomas Valiant, just, separated by several millennia, to say the least. But yeah, I try to incorporate a lot of mythology into what I'm doing with my comics because I think they're very interesting tools to use. And again, tools that have proven themselves to be very good story elements. So, that being said, to try to get to your question, finally, Puffy, am I trying to make my stories mythological? I don't. I don't. Let me put it this way. I don't think that I'm a well. I like to think of myself as a good writer, but the audience will tell me whether or not I am. But I'm not someone who can create a mythology like Tolkien did, we'll say. I'm someone who can use mythology that has come up from the past and to try to breathe some new life back into it. And so, yes, tried to make it mythological in that way. And the stories indeed will have, connections to each other, and it will be an entire giant woven tapestry. The more stories I tell, the more colors and scenes come into this tapestry. So it will be mythological in that sense. But I'm not someone who thinks enough of himself to say that I'm writing a mythology that people are going to think of as mythology in the future. I'm just trying to write good stories. So I know that took a while for me to answer that question, but hopefully I got the answer out. Let's see, Puffy. Scrolling down, Martin says, what is Martin? Oh, I got to put this up. Vikings and the Greeks are cousins that share a common Indo-European heritage. That is why there is a common element in their mythologies. Well, I mean, supposedly, according to mythological sources, the Celts are also ancient Greeks. They're, what is it? So they're a combination of ancient Greeks and ancient Egyptians. So Zeus wanted to sleep with Io, and Io refused Zeus. And so, as punishment, Zeus turned her into a cow and set her to wander the earth. But she eventually ended up in ancient Egypt, where she was turned back into a woman. And the Pharaoh at the time was taken by her beauty and so married Io. And then they had 50 sons and 50 daughters, supposedly, according to the myth. And one of those children, I can't remember the exact, there was Celtus and Scotus, but one was the father and the other the son, if I remember correctly, or was it the mother and the son? But it was, Celtus and then Scotus, and these were the ancestors. Well, again, Io being an ancient Greek, the combination of the Greeks and Egyptians, and those sons, or that son, came up around back into Europe and then wandered down around the top of Greece, over Italy, and down into Spain, where Celts actually have their origin. And then the Spanish Celts moved further north into Great Britain and Ireland, Scotland, what we know of as the traditional Celtic lands today. So that's the mythological origin of the Celts. So they do have a connection with the Greeks as well. So let's see, scrolling down. Let's see what else we got here and what else we got here. Scrolling down. Let's see. Zach Dan says Greeks are called Hellenes for a reason. Yes. Because that's actual, if you read ancient Greek, there's no word. I mean, the word for Greek is Hellenikos. And I know that's probably a bad pronunciation of it. My Greek pronunciation is not very good, but yeah, they're Hellenicans. They don't call them Greeks. They call them Hellenicans. They're Hellenikos. Let's see, scrolling down. Tony says, oh, I should put that beautiful sequence of art back in the background up again before moving on to these comments. Scrolling up. I hate it when I have to do this because I always lose my place and I can't figure out where in the world I was, although I'll try to answer Tony's question. Who had the better grasp of Norse mythology, Kirby and Lee or Simonson? Who had the better grasp of Norse mythology? I would actually say it would probably be Kirby and Lee. Let me see. Let's see. I'm trying to, for the life of me, figure out where in the heck I was when I asked this question. Oh, here I am. Sorry for this uh, pause in the proceedings, but I would say probably Kirby and Lee. Why? Because Kirby, I think, read a lot more in his childhood, watching and reading interviews from Kirby. Um, that's one of the things that he did as a child. His adventure stories were Norse mythology to some extent, whereas I think Simonson understands it more in an adult analytical way, and so is able to sort of bend it to the story whims of where he wants to go. Whereas Kirby, again, I would say, thinks about it more in a kid-like child wonder description of things he loved as a child, and so has much more of a visceral connection to it, and not want to have his stories overshadow the mythology. That would be my take on it, I would say. Let's see. Scrolling down. Oh, finally, although I have to say, I love Simonson's stuff. I love Simonson's stuff. I just answer the question that way. Let's see. Jesse is still here. Glad to see you're here, Jesse. Is it accurate to say literature made to be fiction can't be mythological because mythology is what you believe is the essential truth? Because mythology is what you believe is the essential truth. Oh, okay. So, yeah, I wouldn't call any fiction written today mythological. Tolkien would be the closest thing that you could come to that, but it's a faux mythology, obviously. And he said it was a faux mythology. He wrote it because he didn't believe that there was a good mythology for the British Isles, so he wrote a new one. And he realizes that it's a faux mythology. He just wrote it as that. But yeah, any fiction today, it's not mythology, and it will never be mythology unless you're trying to explore mythological characters. Maybe it might have some connection that way, but it's not. Yes, and that's one of the reasons why, is because literature, as I'm always saying, you go back to Aristotle, it's a reflection of reality. It's you trying to reflect a certain reality to your reader to bring out that reality and the broad brush strokes of it. But mythology is trying to delve into, I think, more first principles of reality, whereas the reality that fiction deals with is talking about death, or talking about honor, talking about heroism. Those are things that are fairly far back in the way that people think, but it's not first principles. Whereas mythology is exploring first principles. It's, what is the universe made of? How did it come to be? Those kinds of things. So I think the two of them are different. Scrolling down. Calliope is here. How you doing, Calliope? Out of all the mythological heroes, which is your favorite, RJ, and why are they your favorite? Ooh, that is one hard question to answer. Odysseus is always, if you're going back to the Greek, Odysseus is my, we'll say, spirit animal, to put it that way. If there is any mythological figure who is a man that I am very much like, it would be Odysseus. So he's my favorite in that way. I very much like to quote Menelaus when he's trying to spur the Spartans on the battlefield of Troy, where he's saying, "Oh, Spartans, are you men?" I very much like those characters. I love those characters, but I'm not that kind of person. I'm Odysseus. I'm the one who creates intricate patterns in his mind and gets people to follow them. And at the same time, is a bit too, we'll say, logical in the way that he does things. There's a line from the Odyssey where his men on the ship are saying, "Odysseus, you are a man of iron. We are just men." And they're saying, "Please, please, just go easy on us this once, right? Because they're saying you're made of iron. And yeah, that's I've gotten that comment about myself many times. It's like, wow, you're robotic, or what are you made of? Steel, or things like that, just because I think in a very logical way. And so yeah, I again, my we'll put it that way, although it's a poor way to put it, but Odysseus is my spirit animal. But again, he would be the person that I'm most like from ancient mythology. But again, if we're talking about pure mythological stories and wonder, um, I would say, oh, for Celtic mythology, really, I'm not sure. There's so many good Celtic myths and heroes from Celtic mythology. Um, I don't know, because there's Menonam, there's there's Lugh of the Long Hand, um, but I don't even know to pick one out of the entire batch, because um, my character, Crom the Destroyer, in Crom the Destroyer, he's based upon Conor Mór, who again is another Celtic mythological character. So I'm very much drawn to the stories of Conor Mór and people like that. But I don't know. There's Cuchulainn and Connachor and so many great characters. I don't know if I could pick one. You're stumping me with it if you're asking me the question for Celtic mythology, because there's that's a hard question to ask. I don't know if I could answer it for Celtic mythology. Scrolling down. Let's see. Zach Dan says wooden ships and iron men. That's a good way to put it. That's a very poetic way to put it. John says transverse, to travel or pass across, over or through. Yes. Thank you very much. Let's see. Scrolling down. Tony says, RJ, did you hear about the underage romance that was snuck into the new Ghostbusters film? If so, any thoughts? No. I think that there was, I saw a couple of YouTube videos and just looked at their thumbnails. I really haven't had any chance to watch anything about that. So haven't really heard anything about it, again, besides reading thumbnails of YouTube videos. So any thoughts? My only thoughts for now are I'm not surprised. Let's put it that way. Scrolling down, see who else is here and what they have to say. Martin says, the pre-Christian Norse mythology are also in the Eddas. Yeah, I think it's Snorri that wrote the Eddas. If I'm not mistaken, I could be very well mistaken. It's been a long time since I've read so-called original sources for the Norse mythology. Let's see. Scrolling down. Sandro says, often in modern media, the gods are portrayed in the same way as Marvel's Thor, as men with power, while in mythology, Thor was thunder itself. Which is funny that you should mention that, because the whole point of Celtic mythology is that these mythological figures who, there's, if you go back to, let's say, Lady Gregory's very big tome on Irish mythology, she separates it into two. She separates it into gods and heroes and men. But really, all the characters are just portrayed as men. Men with, we'll say, almost superhuman abilities, but they're just men. And they live on the earth, and live in Ireland, or a other world that's connected to Ireland. So, it's that mythology is very much portrayed as a mythology of heroes. That is to say, just humans with special powers, instead of gods living in Olympus and things like that. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways that mythological characters are viewed, and not all of them are historically based, to say the least, Alessandro. So you're right on that. Let's see. Martin says Snorri's book is often called the Prose Edda, and the other is called the Poetic Edda. Yes, that's what I'm thinking of. Thank you very much for clearing that up, Martin. Let's see. Puffy says, you ever read Ulysses? Hard. It's a hard read. The Ulysses written like 100 years ago? No, I haven't read that. But you know, Ulysses is Odysseus's Roman name. So sometimes they call him that if you're looking at we'll say, Roman slanted tradition that translates the Odyssey. But no, I haven't read Ulysses. Let's see. John says Shakespeare is hard for me. Shakespeare is not too bad. You just got to learn the rhythm of it. It's something, well, hopefully, I don't know. But from what I hear and what I gather and the things that I see, and the people that I know with kids in high school, they don't read Shakespeare anymore. It's sad. We had to read at least 3 or 4 Shakespeare plays in high school, at least perform one of them as well. Scrolling down. Let's see. Martin also says pre-Christians and pre-philosophers believe that everything that was alive was conscious, so the lightning was not a natural phenomenon, but a living being. Yes, indeed. That's the whole everything's imbued with a god mentality. So let's see. Scrolling down. Oh, let's see. Puffy says, guys, come on, Green Lantern is based on the aliens. Very good. Let's see. Rex also says, I think I heard the original Green Lantern, Alan Scott, was partly inspired by the story of Aladdin. Oh, yeah, well, that would make sense because, again, it's from a lantern, right? Which, if I remember correctly, within the early Alan Scott stories, now that you bring it up and you drag it out of my memory, the lantern was originally crafted out of an ancient lantern, which was in the shape of the old genie lantern from Aladdin. So yeah, there is that connection. So he would be more of a mythology of, we'll say, Middle Eastern origin. It's interesting to think about, Rex. I hadn't thought about it that way before. Scrolling down. But Martin says, the Stoics believe that the Logos or reason is divine, and Christians adopted that the Logos was the one true God, which again goes back to the ideas of people trying to understand reason and the rationality of reality. Let's see. Whoa, we've been going for over an hour. Let's see if I can get through some more of these comments and questions. Let's see. Mystic says, I heard that Green Lantern was originally based on Aladdin. Alan Scott was even originally named Alan Ladd. I had not heard that before. Interesting, though. Thank you very much, Mystic. Scrolling down. Rex also says, RJ, considering that the alternate title for Frankenstein is the postmodern Prometheus, it makes you wonder what it could be referring to. It's just, I thought it was the modern Prometheus, not the postmodern Prometheus. There was no postmodernism back in the time when Frankenstein was written. Postmodernism is something that I think really is generated out of the 1940s, 50s, possibly 60s, in that area. So I think postmodernism is much the idea. What we think of today as postmodernism is very recent, nowhere near the time or date stamp of the creation of Frankenstein. Although, of course, they are based on older ideas. Postmodernism is based upon older French ideas, of course. Let's see. Scrolling down. Sage says, as I understand it, the real monster was Frankenstein himself for rejecting his creation. Well, not just rejecting his creation, but creating it to begin with. Let's put that up in the background. I'm going to lose my place again, but I want to put that stuff up in the background once again, and we'll see if I can get back to Sage's comment. But yeah, Frankenstein, the doctor of Frankenstein was the actual monster. Really, I think most people agree on that in the story. Excuse me. Martin says, we inform our reality with reality by studying history. We look for cause and effect so that we can understand what to do now and what it will most likely cause in the future. Yes, indeed, Martin, I agree 100% with that. That's what the study of history is supposed to be. But I was just talking with someone who is in university right now. One of the universities that I went to, because I went to a number of universities, but they're taking a history major, and they just baffled me, shocked me today by saying that they have to finish up their course in historiography. And I looked at them, I said, "What?" And he said, "We have a course in historiography. It is a mandatory course for anybody who wants to have a history major." And I said to him, "Are you serious? Historiography, when I was studying history, and that wasn't too long ago, we're say 25 years ago, when I was studying history in university, we were told historiography is a logical fallacy. You steer clear of historiography. You know it, you understand it, so much so that you can make sure that you reject it, because that's not what history is about. History is about studying the reality of what happened within these events, trying to take out from them a larger logical explanation of why these things occurred according to, fundamentals like human nature is going to lead men towards X, Y, and Z. And then you project that into the future to try to better understand what is going to happen in the future, which is exactly what you said here, Martin. But today, they're studying historiography, which is to say, well, you look at history and the history itself bends and shapes around the place that you're in when you study it, or the ideology that you adhere to. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my sweet merciful heavens, this is what they now teach as a mandatory class about history. It shows you the downfall of universities and what it is today, why we have so many people confused about trying to even crack open a history book. Anyways, that's my little rant about history for the day. But yeah, thank you for letting me rant and asking that question so I could. Let's see. Miss Maria is here. How you doing, Miss Maria? She says, Jesus was the master of storytelling. He tells stories with interesting twists, and he knows his audience. One of the fun things, I don't know. I don't know anything really about Aramaic or about Hebrew, but I do know that the fun thing is if you read ancient Greek, and what we have of the New Testament is written in ancient Greek, right? That's, I think, all we have the extant sources for. There's actually what is it called? Is it a tense? I can't remember off the top of my head. My ancient Greek grammar is eluding me at the moment. But there is a tense that you can use for specifically telling parables. It's not really the parabolic. That's an arc, but it's a way. It's a specific way of speaking that when you use words in this specific grammatical way, people know that you're telling them a parable. And it's interesting if you read, New Testament in ancient Greek, and you can see these parables that come out and using parable language. So yes, since they lived under a dominant Greek culture, and possibly the people who are describing this stuff, apostles and Jesus himself, knew Greek, then it would be interesting to see how many times he actually said these things in Greek and used that parable speech in that way, because that would be masterful storytelling. I would agree. It would be masterful storytelling. Let's see. Scrolling down. Thank you very much for that comment, Miss Maria. Let's see. Yes, Miss Maria, I think referring to my last video, the Sith are evil, not underdogs, because in my last video, the people writing the new show, they wrote it because it's just about to come out, where the Sith are the underdogs, and they are the focus of the show. Let's see. Scrolling down, John says, a wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish man despises his mother. Proverbs 15:20. Oh, we're getting into some heady stuff right here, but thank you very much. It's a good thing to consider. Let's see. Sound Engraver says, every time you hear them say, we're looking to honor the past, people need to look the other way. We need to get people to understand that this is what they mean. Quite honestly, when you hear someone who is a declared progressive, and it can be in a number of ways, if like Kelly Sudoconic saying she's an declared intersectional feminist, or people who are declared supporters of Black Lives Matter, even after all of the shenanigans that we know that they did with the money, all that kind of thing. If they're a declared progressive in any way, you need to understand that when they say something and the words that they use, they mean the exact opposite of what they say. Quite honestly, you will not go wrong if you take that tack with trying to understand what progressives have to say, because 90 to 95% of the time, when they open their mouths, when they say something, they mean the exact opposite of what they're actually saying. They talk about, they want to, save democracy, but what they want to do is kill any kind of democratic means. I was just thinking about this today. Ridiculousness of I don't want to get too far into the political today, but what is it? Kennedy just announced someone who he's running with as his running mate, and he's going to run as an independent. And you have these talking heads on CNN, I think it was, or was it ABC, talking about how these people, these independents, are going to cause erosion of support for Joe Biden, so they should just not run, because we need to save democracy against Donald Trump, so everybody must vote for Joe Biden. Then that's the way to save democracy, to say that you can't vote for this person and that everybody else should not run because they will take votes away from Biden. So democracy supposedly is you have one person to vote for, and that's it. And that's what everybody should do, and vote for this one person. That's just the system they had under the USSR and communism. Yeah, sure, they declared themselves to be the most democratic place in the world because everybody was forced to vote, but there was only one party that you could vote for. And this is what I'm talking about. These people are so, even if they don't know it, they're so stupid, or sometimes so clever, that every time they open their mouth, what they're saying is the exact opposite of what they're actually saying. They're saying we want to defend democracy when they want to kill even the democratic means that we have within our representational government. It's just bizarre. And anyways, going off on a rant again. But yeah, we'll scroll down a little more here, see if I can get to some more of these comments, because I'm getting far behind. Let's see. Puffy says, let's see. Yes. My pronunciation, hopefully, you can read Puffy's comment, because apparently my pronunciation is not good. Modern slang, yes, my twisted tongue does not deal well with we'll just say large words that I'm not familiar with every day. Martin says, people who inform their reality with fantasy attack history because it causes them cognitive dissonance. Well, I would agree to some extent, Martin, but cognitive dissonance is something that is part and parcel of a progressive mentality, so they're used to it. I understand that it's not something that their brain, let me put it this way. I agree with it in so much as that I do not believe that being able to think in a cognitive dissonant way is natural. It is something that needs to be taught to these people, because their brain wants to think in a very connected, logical way, because that's the way reality works. But yes, they think in a cognitive dissonant way because they've been trained over and over again to think in that way. So they attack history because of cognitive dissonance, but at the same time, I don't think it's the major cause of why they do that. Let's see. Scrolling down. Magma Moose is here and says, RJ, what do you think of the no-kill rule for Batman and other superheroes? Let me put it this way. I think, well, for my books anyways, my books are always, well, there's killing in my books. People die, and that's certainly part of what happens, especially if we're going to talk about Crom the Destroyer. There is certainly death in that, and our character does kill. He's a king. He's on a battlefield. Obviously, there's going to be death. But I try, I try to make my books for all ages, and it says that on every one of my books. It says for all ages, but it's for all ages in a way that um, it's going to be with the superheroes. If they're going to be superheroes, they don't kill. If we have Crom the Destroyer, again, he's it starts off with a story like the Iliad. It's on a battlefield. Obviously, I think kids should read the Iliad, even though there's descriptions of people dying in horrible ways. But that's just me. I think that's actual children's story. It's part of life. It's a part of our history and all that kind of thing. But yeah, the no kill rule for superheroes is something that I adopt for my own superheroes. So I don't think of it as a bad thing. Certainly. I think of it as something to look up to and a way to make, we'll say, not just better stories, but stories that are more complicated. Let's put it that way. I want to make more complicated stories, and in order to have these rules of what they can and can't do for themselves and for others, it's necessary. Excuse me for a minute. I just have to. If I'm fading out here for a minute, I have to take off a layer because it's getting warm in here. But it's something that makes the story better if you can have characters, especially superheroes, which can't kill because they need to deal with problems in unique ways. And problem solving is part of, I think, for my experience and for what I'm writing, part and parcel of the virtuous path of a hero. Because again, the idea that precedes all the virtues is right reason, reason in accord with reality. You have to know how to deal with the rules, and you have to be able to, think in a way that's going to make you virtuous. So that adds another layer to it. So for me, I like that rule. So scrolling down. See if I can get through some more of these with some speed because I'm talking for almost an hour and a half now. Martin says, the Iliad teaches kids to be a sayer of words and a doer of deeds. Well, that's a good way to put it. Let's see. Miss Maria says, I read children-friendly versions of Bible stories. We'll just say my tradition. As kids, you read about the saints. Or read about, and there's a lot of horrible things that happen to the saints, but saint stories are something that used to be all over the place. You don't see them much anymore. Rex says, I noticed that most mythological revivals tend to be based on who slighted whom. The Roman myth of Romulus and Remus was based more on different ideas, albeit over where to build Rome. I had not noticed that. That's an interesting take on it, Rex. I don't read a whole lot of mythologically based stories because I think to myself, if I want to read mythologically based stories, I'm going to go back and read something in ancient Greek, or go back and read Lady Gregory over again. Let's see. Let's see. I'm not sure if this. Puffy was talking to Magma Moose and says, that's interesting. Never thought to ask RJ about the legendary no-kill rule. I actually like the no-kill rule, quite honestly. Let's see. Scrolling down. John says, Proverbs is full of teachings against foolishness. Not sure selfish and foolish people are a phenomenon of today. Granted, cheaper paintings may have made it more prolific. Cheaper printings may have made it more prolific. Yeah, it's more, we'll say, selfish and foolish feed into hypocritical. I think that's part of the broken human nature that's been around for a long time. Randall, I think, is taken off. He says, great to be here, RJ. Nice to have you, Randall. Thanks for coming by. Scrolling down. Sound Engraver says, I'm watching my husband play L.A. Noire, and the mythology referenced in the game makes me see that people in the 1940s were well educated. Yeah, that's one of the things about that I love about that I love about the Conan stories, is because the Conan stories are based upon ancient Celtic mythology, and I think that as a kid, I read those stories um, and incorporated them into the way of thinking so that I can understand, Conan stories in a much more deeper way. And that was even pre-40s, right? That he wrote those stories. But yeah, the idea of myth and reading old mythological stories up until the 1940s, 1950s, it was just part of ordinary life for someone who liked to read, if you ask me. And I think that we should get back to times like that to try to understand our history. That's definitely something that I am fully in favor of. And it's funny that you mentioned L.A. Noir. The story, I'm actually having I don't know, I talked about this on John's live stream. I guess it wasn't earlier on this one. But what I'm doing right now is trying to set up, I'm not sure if this will work correctly, but what I'm trying to do is set up a members page for my YouTube channel where you have to pay to get in, because I will be publishing comics there in short bursts. The first one being a very film noir set in the 1930s book, which is being worked on right now. I have an artist, he's doing, which basically I'm going to separate them into 8-page chapters, and each book will have 3 different chapters. So it has a very film noir feel to it. And again, being set in the 30s, I like to think of it, and it's a very odd way to put it, but it's sort of a film noir that is a combination of John Constantine and a certain magical index. We'll put it that way. Leave it at that. We'll look for that in the future, coming from the 4th age. All right, scrolling down. Let's see. I'm getting way behind. Sandro says, Tolkien based the Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion on Norse and Celtic mythology, but with a Greek vision. In fact, the ages of the world are based on the Hesiod's works and days. I love the works and days. That's one of the major things that I quoted in my mythological breakdown of when I did my, again, master's thesis. So, yeah. And the idea of Moira that comes from that is very, very key to understanding, I think, Greek mythology. Let's see. Scrolling down. Sound Engraver says, not to say my husband would love to have taught college back in the 1940s as opposed to now. Taught college back in the 1940s. Well, it'd be like Indiana Jones, right? Let's see, scrolling down. I'll try to get through some of these with speed since we've been going really long today. Martin says, there is a lot to learn from reading Greek and reading Vedic text. I'm not going to be able to pronounce that anyway, in any way, shape, or form. But he says, is different. The whatever. I can't pronounce it for the life of me. Is a different explanation of Plato's analogy of the chariot. Interesting. Okay. That's new to me. Scrolling down, but yeah, my ancient Greek is not the best. I do have to read with a dictionary on hand, an ancient Greek dictionary. But I do want to read more and more in ancient Greek because I love the complexity of the language. Let's see, scrolling down. Oh, Alessandro has a question for me. Alessandro says, RJ, what do you think is the element that unites all the mythologies of the world? Again, I think the element that is, we'll say, it's just what I talked about when I was answering, I think, Sound Engraver's question earlier. It's the fact that you have people and they're trying to understand first principles of creation. That's the thing that ties together the mythologies of the world. They're trying to understand not just forces and not just their history, that is part of it, but in the back of it, bringing it right back to fundamental principles of why things exist and how they exist. So I think that's the thread that ties everything together. Let's see. Scrolling down. See if I can get through, again, as I said, some of these with some more speed. Let's see. Yes, again, Robert, that's exactly what I was trying to say. Most mythologies are an attempt to understand the world. Yeah. Let's see. Puffy says, so physics are hyperlogical. You go back to metaphysics. I mean, Aristotle, no, I won't say the creator of logic, but they will say the presenter of logic for the very first time, had books on physics and on metaphysics as well. So they're definitely connected. Let's see. Randall, oh, you're still here, Randall? Great. TV and entertainment physics are more like a county fair fortune teller. Oh, sorry, psychics. Sorry, not physics. Psychics. So my apologies. Buffy says, so psychics are hyperlogical. I'm thinking that, well, my explanation was that if it's not actual, in your story, in the story that I was relating, it's not actual. If it's not actual being able to see the future, it's being able to put together clues in a rational fashion without rationally understanding them. So yeah. My apologies for misreading that too quickly, Puffy. So Randall says, TV and entertainment psychics are more like a county fair fortune teller. Real psychic impressions is your intuition. Yeah, that's you go to something like The Mentalist, which is a great show. I think that's more towards the point of what psychics are. Let's see. Martin says, people naturally use inductive reasoning, and after we discovered geometry, we've developed deductive reasoning. The downside of inductive reasoning is people see correlation without causation. Yeah. The fact that people don't actually know what logical fallacies are is a big problem when they try to use reason. So I agree, Martin. Let's see. Miss Maria brings up a point that we were just talking about in John's Long Box an hour ago, or I guess 2 hours ago now. Floods seem to be a constant thing in myths. Yes, they do. A lot of myths have a flood in them from all around the world. Let's see. Scrolling down. Trying to get through some more of these comments. Let's see. Rex says, what about the concept of psychic persons being able to literally hear other people's thoughts or get others to hear their thoughts? That's a different kind of psychic, if you ask me. I don't really know. No, to me, that's never really, mind reading has never really been connected in my mind to psychic abilities. And that's not what psychic abilities meant. I don't know. Possibly they are meant, they're supposed to mean that, but I've never taken them to mean that. So to reading other people's thoughts. But I mean, again, you want to go back to the idea of, let's see, people are talking a lot about the biblical here tonight, so we'll go back to the biblical about reading men's hearts, as something that could be done by men. Go back to the Bible. I mean, Jesus was a man, right? And he's supposed to be 100% God, 100% man at the same time. So, being 100% man, he could read people's hearts. So that was a thing, by the power that he had access to, I suppose. Let's see, scrolling down. My apologies. I was just distracted by something flying by my head. Let's see. Hopefully I'm not that far behind. Alessandro's talking about hidden cities. Alessandro says the hidden city trope is one of my favorite tropes. Yeah, I love it as well. Let's see. Puffy says Celtic mythology is where that trope came from. Well, it's used over and over again in Celtic mythology. I think it probably came from a lot, might have been used by different mythologies as well. I can't say for certain. Yes, Alessandro is right. He says original comics were real pulpish. Yeah, I love pulpish comics. Let's see. Robert is talking about fairy mounds, which was another way to get into other worlds. He says fairy mounds and the Tir na Nog. So yeah, that was one of the things. What was it? The Duha de Dana, if I do remember, the children of the goddess Dana. were driven out of Ireland, so they went to live in basically under the hills and in vales. So basically, they had castles and things like that, but Irish castles were large mounds again, but they hid them through what were called vales, and you couldn't get through these vales, which were another world, basically, right? You go through this vale in order to get to this other world, since the people of the Goddestana had a special ability to do this, and this is where the idea of fairies came from, and all this kind of thing, which is the later legends of Ireland. Scrolling down, Rex says, RJ, one idea I had for different mythologies, other worlds, is that they're literally other planets that the gods colonized and access via portals. It sounds very much like Stargate. I think that one's been done, Rex. But yes, I love Stargate, just to let you know. Let's see. Calliope says, I am always the most interested in exploring the lore of a story world. Deep diving into the lore has taken me into days of lore video rabbit holes again and again. Example, Dragon Age and Mass Effect. Well, it's good to know. I try to, every time I put something out in printed format anyways, try to add something to the lore, as it were, of the world. I put out a map. I put out cards which have explanation of the histories of people, things like that. So it's or letters. There was letters that came with some versions of the Valiant Heroes, things like that, from the intelligence agency that operates within that superhero-like world, all that kind of thing. Let's see. Buffy says, I'm a writer like you too. Guess we got to keep praying for more creative imaginations. Yes, indeed. Let's see. Martin says, the Celtics and Verdict people were both Indo-Europeans. So, holy Moses, if I'm that far behind, I got a ways to get through all of these comments. If people are only talking about that stuff now. Let's see. Scrolling down. Tony has a question. Says, RJ, did you watch The Northman? If you did, what do you think of it? No, I see very, very little. I don't own a television. Let me put it that way. I don't own a television and haven't for the last 20 years. I do watch some things on the computer, but not very much. I watch, if I watch anything, it's either old stuff or stuff from other countries, because I just don't really have any investment within either North American, or even European entertainment that's coming out right now. I just don't. So I never really get to watch much of anything new that comes out. Let's see. Scrolling down, see if we got anything else that I can answer. Buffy says, RJ, what were some stories you came up with as a kid? I used to write, the whole Mary Sue idea. The Mary Sue comes from somebody writing fan fiction for Star Trek, the original series. I wrote fan fiction for Star Trek, the original series, creating my own characters. I basically used D&D stats and rolling of dice to try to create an entire crew, and then wrote stories on that. I also wrote when I was a kid on the bus, because I had like an hour bus ride each way when I was a kid living in, way out in the country. I would write, what do they call it? Build your own stories, build your own adventure stories, things like that. Turn to this page. If you do that, turn to that page. Those are the kinds of stories that I wrote. Nothing that I think I have left anymore. Let's see. Rex says, I read somewhere that Kirby's work is the antithesis of Lovecraft's work, where Lovecraft saw the cosmos as a potential for despair and horror. Kirby saw it as a potential for adventure and wonder. That's a good way to put it. Well, I agree with that description of Lovecraft. It's based on a nihilistic attitude, which is why I don't really put much stock in Lovecraft. I don't, a lot of people say the Conan myth is connected to the Lovecraft myths, which technically, yes, they were friends. And so they said, can I use this character for my story? And that supposedly, according to some of these letters between them, but really don't care. I'm not going to incorporate any Lovecraftian elements into my crime stories, which are reflection of the Conan stories and that pulp way of writing. But yeah, Kirby is definitely much more of a let's look at things in a wonderful fashion. That is a very good way to put it. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. Scrolling down. Zach Dan says, I'm pretty sure the Tolkien translated ancient records he found dramatizing some bits here and there. Really, Zach Dan. I'm not sure where that idea came from, but hey, you can prove it. More power to you. Let's see. Scrolling down. Scrolling down. Sage says that Tolkien's approach to telling the story, he found Bilbo in Frodo's book. Oh, that would be an interesting way to tell a story about Tolkien. Let's see. Alessandro says, RJ, what do you think of the idea of Nietzsche's eternal return? As I don't know if you've seen some of my videos, Alessandro, but Nietzsche is basically trying to parrot Schopenhauer, which was his teacher, and all he's doing is taking Augustine of Hippo and taking all of his ideas and flipping them upside down. We had to study a lot of Nietzsche in university because, well, I took philosophy as my second undergraduate degree. I had a major in philosophy and a honors in political theory. So yeah, we studied a lot of Nietzsche, read probably the entire, we'll say, run of, at the very least, if I can remember correctly, the most popular books of Nietzsche, and had to do reports on them and everything else. It's nothing but a rehashing in an upside down way, in a nihilistic upside down way of all of Augustine of Hippo's ideas. And so I don't place any real stock in Nietzschean ideas. They were fascinating to read and to try to make some sense of in a university sense, but I don't place any real stock in it because it's just all based on nihilism, the idea that there is no truth. Let's see. Scrolling down. Martin says, before writing, we maintain stories that teach us about ourselves and teach us how to live through poetry that was memorized and sung all the time. Yep, definitely. Sage also says, Odysseus's greatest strength was clever lies. Well, here's the thing about Odysseus. I know I said I would probably go faster, but here's the thing about Odysseus, and about also lying in ancient cultures. You really couldn't do it. You had to be creative with the truth. Let me just put it that way. And it's the same in Celtic mythology as well. You put yourself under bonds in Celtic mythology, and if you break those bonds, you said you are going to do this, then if you don't do that, you get cursed. And it's kind of the same thing in a different way within your ancient Greek mythology as well. You can't really swear to something and then not fulfill that because the gods are going to come after you. And so, yes, Odysseus is using the truth in a creative way. Because, like, for instance, the one that comes to mind is Polyphemus, the Cyclops. He said I think he promised to tell him his name, but he told him that his name was Odysseoi. Odysseoi means nobody, basically. So it's a different version of his name, being Odysseus. The different version of his name really means nobody. And he told the son of Poseidon, which was Polyphemus, that his name was nobody, so that when he cursed him after getting away and wanted his father Poseidon to revenge him by killing Odysseus, he curses nobody because he screams out his name. I say, I curse Odysseoi, I curse Odysseoi, which is I curse nobody, I curse nobody. So no one knew. If you're saying I curse nobody, then you're cursing nobody. So Odysseus was trying to use, the truth in a creative way to get around a curse, things like that. So lies in ancient mythology is a very, let's just say, it's something that modern people don't understand. They don't understand how much the word of someone is worth and what they fear, the consequences they fear in actually not telling the truth, because people lie all the time in modern culture, just literally lie all the time. You can't turn on the television without seeing people lying. So yeah, there's that. Let's see, scrolling down, scrolling down. Trying to get through these with a little bit more speed here, see if we can get to the end. Sage also says, there was a Greek almost as smart as Odysseus who focused on truth. Odysseus conspired and succeeded in killing that man. Who was that? I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, again, yeah, you got to watch your P's and Q's if you're in the ancient world. And we'll just say if you are in those kinds of stories. Let's see. Alessandro says, the heroes of mythology inspired, for example, when I say the status of the, what is it? The Farnes, the Heracles at the museum in Naples, it inspired me to get fit. Oh, okay. So it's a sculpture of Heracles. So yeah. That's one of the things I was thinking about doing my Saturday video on, was about the kind of mythological character to comic book storytelling and other kinds as well, and how it inspires and is created, how it is created in a sense of beauty and inspires the reflection of that beauty in ourselves. But yeah, that's great to hear, Alessandro. We'll go through these. Zach10 says, sometimes conservatives focus too much on the logos, which is good for calculating truth, but ethos and pathos are important for persuasion. If something is true, it should affect your life. Yes and no. I would say, what's that old saying? You don't need to defend the truth. All you need to do is, the truth is like a lion. You don't need to defend the truth. You just need to set it free. So it'll defend itself. So that's where I think that but again, human beings will probably think more towards what you're saying, Zach 10, than what I am. But that's the way I've always thought about it. But yes, pathos, ethos, those things are important, to be sure. Buffy says, RJ, people like you are needed in this world just as much as emotional thinkers. Most logical people I know tend to have the biggest hearts. Well, thank you very much, Buffy. Thank you. That is a compliment indeed. Let's see. Scrolling down. Scrolling down. Martin also says, Snorri wrote the prose Edda, and no one knows who wrote the poetic Edda. It's a collection of poems found, I believe, in a barn in Iceland, and it was taken back to Denmark to the Royal Library. Okay. Good history lesson there. Let's see. Scrolling down. Everybody's talking in the chat, which is great to see. See if I can get to the last of these comments. Scrolling down. Oh, let's see if anybody else. Nope. Everybody's talking to each other. So we're getting to the end of the stream. Bethel is here. Were you here before, Bethel? I'm not entirely sure, but nice to see you here. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's go with what Bethel says. 101 Nights was compiled in Persian Arabic space in the 16th century and translated around the 17th to 18th century, but heroic literature died and ridiculed in the 16th century with Don Quixote. I still say that there was, again, yeah, I will say heroic literature in the sense of inspirational heroic literature. So it's interesting that you put it that way, Bethel, because I would say if that was the case, and again, it might very well be, but if it was the case, comic books as a form of the pulp genre probably brought back, and that's why it's so inspirational in a heroic way. The idea of a hero as a hero, not as a ridiculous figure. So, scrolling down here. Let's see. Martin says, people don't tell study history in college. They are told what to think about history, not for what it is, but for what a teacher tells you to think. Yes, that's probably the way that it works now, unfortunately. Scrolling down. Scrolling down. See if we have anything here. Yes, Martin, you are correct. If I remember correctly, New Testament was written in Chionian Greek. Again, my pronunciation is let's just say lacking in various ways. Let's see. Zach Dan says, modernism subverted the good, postmodernism subverted truth, and in bitterness, metamodernism is subverting the beautiful and the natural. Zach Dan, you are very poetic this evening. Thank you very much for stating that. You are, I'd say, 100% correct. Let's see, scrolling down. Scrolling down, see if I can get to the end of this chat. Martin says, in Canada, they are passing a law for life imprisonment for hate speech to protect democracy and freedom, although free speech includes hate speech. There is no freedom of speech in Canada. Let's just put it that way. There isn't. The freedom of speech is an American thing. I don't know of many other cultures that even have the concept of freedom of speech, and it's certainly not something that exists in Canada. Just to let you know, to say that they have free speech in Canada to base your let's just say argument upon that is fallacious. You can say that they have statements about freedom of speech, but there is no freedom of speech. It's not because, well, first of all, the idea in Canada and almost every other country is they're not unalienable rights. They're rights granted to you by the government. So even if the government grants you free speech as a right, that can still be taken away from you by the government because they gave it to you. They can take it away. If it's not unalienable, that is to say exists within you because you're a human being, then they can take it away anytime they want. So, there is no such thing as free speech in any place that doesn't have unalienable rights. There just isn't. Let's see. Scrolling down. Scrolling down. Let's see. If there any other, have to scroll way down, see if there's any other comments for me. I think Zach Dan has another one here. When it comes to superheroes killing, I think it depends on whether they are primarily law enforcement or if they are warriors. Both are necessary at times, but are trained and think differently. So yes and no. I mean, the idea of a just war and things like that, because police are basically the homegrown version of a military. So yeah, they would have, and they do have the power to kill. So, but since I focus on superheroes, they're mostly vigilantes. So they don't have the requisite power to actually kill anybody. So, steer clear of that idea. Let's see. Scrolling down. Oh, Buffy has a question for me. He says, RJ, learning about the no-kill rule really changed the way I think about morality and philosophy. Okay. Let's see. Scrolling down. Michael says, Greek used to be taught in American schools up until the mid-1900s. Yeah, and Latin more especially, because, if you want to look at it this way, Latin is sort of a bastardized Greek. So you know, I wish they still taught Latin, because it was taught up until the mid, about the 1950s, 1960s. Let's see. Alessandro says, RJ, do you think The Sixth Age of the World by Augustine? Do you know The Sixth Age of the World by Augustine of Hippo? Not off the top of my head, Alessandro. I don't. Quite honestly. Sound Engraver says you will definitely check out my shorter stories. Thank you very much, Sound Engraver. So the idea is actually, just to get back to it really quickly, the idea is to have 3 chapters, and each chapter be divided up into 8-page sections. That way I'll put out an 8-page section. Usually what I'm thinking of is I'll put out 2 8-page sections every month. That way I can actually end on cliffhangers, because you have, one half of the book, or no, two-thirds of the book, and then you want to get into the last part of it. That'll come next month, and to get people coming back for more. So, stop on cliffhangers, things like that. That's what I'm hoping to do. I think cliffhangers are a dying breed of storytelling, which need to be brought back. Let's see. Holy Moses, I am so far behind in this chat, but it's great to see so many people here and to have everybody interact with the chat. So thank you very much. Let's see. Zach Dan says, will this be another Age of the Valiant Tales? So the stories that I'm talking about that I'm going to be publishing, they're going to be in black and white. We're not going to have them colored. That's, again, another film noir nod there. We might have them colored in the future, but yes, it's in the Valiant universe. It's just in the 1930s. So, so earlier in the story. And I have, from long ago, a super chat from Taz. Thank you very much for the £5, Taz. He says, hey, RJ, I'm late, but great to be here. Not as late as I am with getting to your super chat, Taz. So thank you very much for that. All right, let's see if I can get through some more of this chat. I've been going for almost 2 hours. I can't go much longer, even if I don't get to the end of the chat. Let's see. Scrolling down, Sage says, Batman's rogue gallery may have ultimately come to represent different types of mental illness. The no-kill rule has a scientific basis. If his rogues can be cured, it may work for other people. Oh, that's an interesting way to put it. Let's see. Scrolling down, Tony says, RJ, have you ever read R.W. Chambers' The King in Yellow? That sounds, I do not know, because honestly, it sounds like a story that I didn't read, but I can't, I don't think it was by R.J. Chambers, quite honestly. So I might be thinking of a different story, Tony. So I'm not entirely sure. Question mark is here. How you doing? Any thoughts on new myths for the idea of metamodernism stage? Let me try that again. Any thoughts on new myths for the idea of metamodernism stage that we are now in? Any thoughts for new myths? I don't know. Quite honestly, being a conservative-minded person, I don't want new myths. I want to go back to old myths. So that's the way I think about it. Okay. So scrolling down, Martin says, Hegel's philosophy of history says that if people come together and have a name for themselves, and history only remembers them for their achievements, mythology is the root of historically great people. Never been much to put much stock in what Hegel says, but again, it's an interesting way to put it. Let's see. Scrolling down. Oh, let's see what else we got here. Yes, Michael says SG1. Well, Stargate SG1 was a good show. It was indeed. I liked all of Stargate, actually. It got better and better as it went along, though. But it's good to go back and watch the campy first seasons of the first show. Let's see. Reminds me a little bit of the campiness of the original Star Trek. Robert says, we're enjoying the stream, RJ. Well, thank you very much. Puffy also says, RJ, you don't own a television? I haven't owned a television for 20 years. No, quite honestly. So yeah, if I want to watch something, I watch it on the internet, or, I have a CD player in my, DVD player in my computer, so I'll watch things on DVD and things like that. But no, don't own a television. If it's, you know, it, I don't see the need for it with the internet, quite honestly. Um, let's see. Scrolling down, Zach Dan says, RJ had to ride the bus uphill both ways in the snow. Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Let's see. Randall says, been trying around with an idea of writing a Naked Gun style slapstick script for the live action Thundar the Barbarian. I think they did that with Conan, probably about 10 years ago now. Can't remember what the name of that show was. Let's see. Martin says, Lovecraft saw man's existence as meaningless. It is a deeper nihilism because not only is existence meaningless, but also we are. Well, the whole idea of the Lovecraftian, if I read it correctly, the Lovecraftian world is the fact that the whole thing is the dream of an ancient god. Basically, the lesser gods, which are still massively, powerful, seek to keep him asleep so that he can still dream, because even they are part of his dream, and you're nothing more than a dream. So everything is meaningless. Scrolling down, because that god will eventually wake at some point, and everything he dreamt will just become nothing. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. Martin also says, I prefer Stoic philosophy because it's about living your life instead of about how one should live their life. Well, I think the Stoics had some interesting points, but I take Augustine of Hippo's criticism of the Stoics very, very personally, actually, because I think he brings up a lot of good points. Basically poking holes in their philosophy. Let's see. Scrolling down. Jonathan James Johnson Jr. Welcome, Jonathan. How you doing? I'm not sure I've seen you here before. I think I recognize your avatar, but not your name. But that's the first time I've seen a post for this live stream, anyways. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. What else I can find here? Martin can type spectacularly fast. Martin says, the Spartans prided themselves on their argumentation that they could convince people to support them in their deeds by being a clever sayer of words. Okay. Quite honestly, most people don't think of Spartans as being eloquent in any way, but there's actually Spartan poetry. We still have some fragments of Spartan poetry. So, they weren't total meatheads. We'll put it that way. Scrolling down. Robert apparently says that YouTube just censored him. I don't know what for, because I'm not entirely sure what he's referring to, but that's YouTube if they're doing that. Scrolling down. Martin says, I hate it when dummies say that is just your truth. My truth is this other truth. In reality, there is only one truth. It's ridiculous. I had a friend of mine, actually, he's a priest. He had, basically this teenager. She came in and started arguing with him, and she was saying, well, that's just your truth, right? And he said to her, this is the way the conversation went. When you think about things as your truth, my truth, then this is where things go to. But he said to her, okay, if everything is just your truth, then the Nazis killing all the people that they killed within, gas chambers and everything else, that was their truth. So you can't actually blame them for that. And the girl went, yeah, I suppose you can't blame them for that. Yeah. That's where my truth, your truth leads to. Scrolling down. Jonathan says, no disrespect, but your videos are great to fall asleep to. Well, I will try to take that as a compliment, Jonathan. uh, let's see. Scrolling down, scrolling down. Oh, yeah, Vaz. Only 10 minutes till we reach 120 minutes. I'm going to try to see if I can cut that off of the pass. Let's see. Robert says, it's getting late here. I'm going to have to hit the hay. Thanks for another great stream, RJ. I'm right behind you, Robert. Hopefully, I'm not going to be here very much longer. Let's see. Scrolling down, scrolling down. See what we have here. Martin says, my buddy took Latin in university and they didn't teach you Latin. You discussed segments of Latin literature in English where the teacher tells you what the readings mean. It's all nonsense. I took ancient Greek in university, and what we did was translate Hesiod. And, you know, literally, the Battle of the 300 was the first thing I had to do. One of the first things I had to do as a major exercise within learning Greek was to translate the bloody thing from its Greek into English. So yeah, I don't. That's what you're describing is not an actual Latin class. It's part of classics, but it's not part of a Latin class. Let's see. Calliope, yes, you're running me ragged tonight, but that's okay. I had a nap during the day, thinking that this might happen. Let's see. Scrolling down. Jonathan says, I've been subscribed to your channel for a while. If you're the person, yeah, Jonathan, that's where I recognize your image from, because I think you're the one who keeps on putting his comments with these things at the end as well. Your little blurbs, your little emojis at the end. That's why I recognize, because I do try to read every comment that people post. So I'm glad to see you here on one of the live streams, and I'm glad that you've been around for a while. I love people who have been here for a long time and still want to listen to me ramble on. That means something to me. It means I'm actually, making an impact. So thanks for that. Let's see. Scrolling down. Jonathan also says, I watched a video talking about how Greeks and Roman people weren't all as gay as most people think today. It was all one man's opinion in a book he wrote. Well, I don't think, the way that people put it today, it's not that far gone. Again, it's probably closer to what we have. Well, I would say we're probably outstripping that right now, what they had in their culture. But anyway, it was still looked down upon by many people. Let's see, scrolling down. Sage says good night. And Michael wants a 10-hour live stream, but I don't think that's happened because I think I've gotten to the end of the chat, or close to the end of the chat. Martin also, the other Martin, says, I appreciate your comic book service. Thank you very much. That is directed towards me. You might be speaking to someone else in the chat. Calliope says, this reminds me of comics with your boy Zach. We used to do this to him when he was diversity in comics. Well, I try to get back to that fun section, because Calliope, I was right there with you in the comments when we were doing that to Richard. Let's see. I have hit the end of the comments. Thank you. Thank you very much for everybody for being here. John says, thanks for the, I'm clicking on the wrong things. It says, thanks for the chat, RJ. Everyone, thank you very much. Rex, you're still here. Great to see everybody here. And we had 30 to almost 40 people in the chat. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming tonight and listen to me rant about mythology for 20 minutes and then go on tangents for another hour and 40 minutes? Good heavens. Oh, you guys certainly deserve a medal for showing up here every week. Anyways, thank you very much once again. Just a reminder to anybody who is new here, there are 2 links in the description for my graphic novels if you want to go over and take a look at them, see if they are for you. And I have regular videos that come out on Saturdays. And I am going to play the trailer as an outro for Crom the Destroyer, which is one of my open campaigns. It is in demand, so you can still order it. And I want to thank you once again for showing up. I will see you all again next week. Bye.
An age ago, the beating heart of our people was a king who knew only victory. He wanted nothing more than an honorable death on the battlefield. Yet, none could match him, and so he wandered the earth, becoming lost in time and tide. Then we too lost our honest purpose, while silk-clad men sat upon the throne. But tremble now, all cities that lay under the stars, for out of the shadows and mists of the land of promise, our courage has been rekindled, our heart has returned, and the world will burn.